Oh, what's up GameLeapers, Timestamps Eggs is back at. I hope you're all well. And big news, Riot have released their list of changes for the upcoming 11.9 patch. And there are 19 champions on the hit list, guys, so to know the champions getting buffed or nerfed and the items getting buffed or nerfed, you have got to stick around. And by the way, if the likes stop, the timestamp stops, so make sure you smash the thumbs up button. And one thing you can also smash is one of those links to the GameLeap website. See, why do you think thousands of your fellow summoners are signed up? No doubt for more of me, that's for sure. But it also reached their potential to discover what their peak rank actually is. So if you want maximum gains this season, guys, click on one of the links in the description or comment section. Alright, let's get into it, and we've got to start by talking about the expected champion buffs. And the first of 9 buff champions is Kog'Maw, probably because the Puke Spitter is getting a visual update, so all of us splash a bit more cash on this game. But in all seriousness, Kog hasn't had the best of times this season. Despite getting a W buff in 11.5, which can be pretty deadly with Navori Quickblades because you have your arcane barrage up 24/7, you're still going to die more than anyone else. As we all know in this meta, guys, mobility is a huge part of it. Like every champion these days seems to have a dash or, some sort of movement speed bonus, invisibility, whatever it is, and as Kog'Maw you're really lacking and vulnerable as a result. A 40% win rate in high elo probably warrants a buff as well. Now up next we have a champion who pairs incredibly well with Kog'Maw in the bot lane, and this is Lulu. And this is a little strange because Lulu is performing a lot better than Kog'Maw across the board and just good overall. The new Moonstar Renewer isn't as bad as what players were anticipating, and with a buff Kog'Maw in 11.9, Shirelia's battle song, which got changed and honestly buffed last patch, becomes even more viable because the movement speed you can give old Sick Note via battle song's passive. And those of you playing spellcasting supports will definitely want to stick around for the item changes as well. Now let's switch our attention to 2 top laners getting 11.9 buff, guys, and these include Shen and Set. And Shen is another interesting one like Lulu because he's doing fine, if not more than fine. If you chuck a Sunfire Aegis and Thormail on, you're one of the most frustrating champions to play against in the game. But a Set buff actually does sound legit. Out of all the Stridebreaker abusers, he is by far the weakest. Just compare Set to a Darius or a Garen or an Urgot, he's not really there. And the Blade of the Rune King nerfs haven't helped either. A 45% win rate in Martian above sums up the fall of Ionia's Haymaker. And Set mains, Darius mains, Garen mains, Urgot mains, you will also want to stay tuned for the item talk. So 4 champions so far, who could be next? Well, let's talk about the 3 junglers getting an injection of power next patch, and the first is Kayn, and specifically Rast, or Red Kayn. And it's true, Rast has been a shadow of his former self. You guys see what I did there? And it seems like yesterday Kayn had that 55% win rate, but that was actually back in the pre-season, so it's been a while. And since the healing nerfs and Grievous wins buffs and actual Kayn nerfs, Rast has been impacted severely and a buff seems deserved. Now the second jungler, guys, is Kindred, and despite having the damage she needs against champions, she doesn't have the damage and clear speed to full clear like all the meta junglers we're seeing at the moment. Gromp, red buff, blue buff, no worries with these, but with multiple jungle monsters it's a struggle. But what Riot will actually address, who knows? And the last jungler, guys, is Trundle. Yes, he still exists, who's one of the most unpopular champions on the Rift, but the troll is actually interesting. Just because you can go with Trinity Force as your mythic for more damage, or Frostfire Gauntlet for more tank. Like Kindred though, clearing Raptors, Krugs and Wolves is a tall order on the Season 11 Rift, so hopefully Riot target that. Now the only mage getting a buff next patch, guys, isn't Azir, who is about as useful as a pigeon in real life, or Ryze, or Orianna, it's Xerath, but this honestly is more than warranted. You see, even with the new Horizon Focus item being ideal for artillery mages like this floating Electron, it's the same issue Kog'Maw has. What do you do when you're getting jumped on by a Camille, or a chem-tanking Hecarim, or a stride-breaking Darius? Nothing. And the Ascendant also has one of the most useless passes in the game, which might give you more sustain so you can spam a few more spells in the laning phase, but it's overkill. And if there are any Xerath mains watching, by the way, what should this buff be? Now the last of the 9 champions getting 11.9 buffed, guys, is Taric. And this one looks scary because, well, Taric is strong at the moment. Whether you go Locket or Chem Tank with Boots of Lucidity, you have some of the best peeling and engage in the game, and an ultimate that is a great counter to all the burst damage in the game at the moment. You can enable AD carries such as Jinx, Vayne, who are both good at the moment, and the new Kog'Maw to unleash. So who knows what this will be. And by the way, guys, any thoughts on the listed changes? Let me know exactly what they are in the comments. So those are the buffs, but now it's time to dampen the mood and talk about the 11.9 champions getting nerfed and what these could mean. So we have 10 nerfs here, guys, and we're going to talk about the upcoming jungle nerfs. And I'm sure most of you will be happy to hear that Hecarim is one of 3 junglers on the chopping block. Despite the Q nerf in 11.6 and the E nerf in 11.7, Heck is still one of the best champions in the game and also the most banned, which goes to show how much players hate playing against him. So another nerf for Hecarim. Then we have 2 new junglers getting nerfed, and these are Morgana and Diana, who like Hecarim are 2 of the most successful champions right now, let alone junglers. The 11.8 buffs to their clear speed has made them 2 of the best full clearers and therefore junglers you can choose, but let's hope Riot don't nerf them into the ground just after making them viable in the jungle role. Now while we're kind of talking about mages, let me give you 3 more who are getting nerfed next patch, and I reckon you guys can guess the first. Yes, it's Vladimir, who is the most OP champion at the moment. The lower Q cooldown coupled with the Hextech Rocket Bell magic pen change have sent Vlad from being good to being beyond busted. And this sounds like typical Rito, right? They buff a champion that doesn't even need a buff, only to make them worse than what they originally were in the patch right after. Now the second mage getting jabbed is Heimerdinger, who is taking over the bot lane surprisingly in this meta. Well, it's not actually that surprising because of the oppressiveness, the ability haste with Leandri's Anguish, the synergy with the new haste effect from Staff of Flowing Water. Like, it's too much for AD carries and way too easy to make work. So much so that the Turret Master has a 58% win rate in high elo. But hopefully Riot don't nerf the Donga too hard in other roles. And speaking of other roles, guys, mid lane Rumble is an 11-9 target too. And it's funny because Riot tried to address mid lane Rumble a couple of patches ago, but after buffing his passive in E and 11-8, they gave him a net buff instead. And here we are. But this nerf is probably the most real out of them all because the Junkyard Yordle is currently winning 60% of his games in the mid lane in high levels of play. The early game prio and the Night Harvester damage spike is one of the best in the game, so who knows what's coming. Now we talked about Cogmore and bot lane Heimerdinger. Well, let's talk about the upcoming nerf to Jinx. Well, it's actually a bug fix, which is stopping you guys from splashing nearby enemies for too much crit damage with your rockets, and this will have some impact because your AoE, if you like, in team fights and in the bot lane won't be as strong, but Jinx will still be a strong champion overall. Now, I alluded to Garen not long ago, guys, when talking about Stridebreaker. Well, it's time to talk about the Demacian again because Garen is indeed getting nerfed, and the Gaz has been a top performer this season. He's always had one of the highest win rates, his mythic Stridebreaker is one of the best going around, and the rest of his build is very strong, right? Steric's Gauge, Deadman's Plate. It's also hard to beat him in lane and stop him from Beyblading your teammates to death the later the game goes, so hopefully this nerf opens up a bit more counterplay rather than just kiting. Now the final two champions getting nerfed in 11-9, guys, also reside in the top lane, and the first of these is Mundo, who just got buffed for the top lane, so more typical Rito here. Well, I did mention in yesterday's Most Broken Champions update video that the dock is very strong right now, but still funny how Riot are doing a 180 with a lot of champions next patch. But yes, the extra passive healing is giving you Mundo mains the best sustain in the game. You harmonize this with Grasp of the Undying, Second Wind, and just a Doran Shield, and you can't be killed. And the more HP you recover when you cleaver an enemy champion adds to this ridiculous sustain. And speaking of sustain, the last champion nerf is coming to Gragas, guys, and seeing as this is the MSI patch, I'm guessing Riot don't want Gragas picked every game by the pro teams, but in solo queue, it's not like Grag mains are doing too much rabble-rousing. Around a 50% win rate across the board, you know, suggests he's actually in a pretty stable state, which he is, so let's hope Riot don't nerf him big time so you guys playing ranked are affected too much. So we're now on to the last part of the video, guys, and this of course is the item nerf section, and these are more often than not will really determine if a champion or role is going to be trash tier or OP tier. And speaking of OP tier, you guys have got to check out the GameLeap website. Informative content designed for you by challengers. Courses, guides, videos, analyses, it's the best on the web, so get signed up. Links down below. So those are the champions getting buffed and nerfed next patch, guys, but what about the items we all buy? Well, let's start with the item buffs, and there are 3 of these. So the first is to Moonstone Renewer. See, I told you Lulu and spellcasting supporting players to stick around, didn't I? So Riot actually changed Moonstone in 11.8 so that it now empowers both heals and shields in combat, but gave it the most useless mythic passive in history. Anyway though, for Lulu, who is getting buffed, 11.9 looks like a wonderland right now, and better for her fellow enchantresses, and Ivern. Now the next item buff, guys, is to Death's Dance, which has flown completely off the radar since the buffs to Grievous wins and nerfs to the game's healing. So bruisers, not all hope is lost, and you bruisers will also be happy to know that Wit's End is getting buffed, which is another item that isn't built nearly enough as it should be, and it's not just good for fighters. AD carries with on-hit and attack speed will be interested in the buff like Cogmore, and other DPSs who rely on attack speed like Aurelia, Yone, Yasuo will also be interested. So yeah, the first listed item nerf in 11.9 is to Turbo Chemtank, and I can hear all of you cheering at that news because it has been exhausting playing against Turbo Chemtank since Riot changed it in 11.2. Like, it's been the only mythic I've seen. Its OPness has made fighters like Hecarim build it, some supports build it, and it just gives you way too much for just 2,800 gold. So about time. And the second and last listed item nerf in 11.9, guys, is to Deadman's Plate. So Garen, Darius, Set, Udyr, Skarner, Rammus, I'm guessing Riot will take some of the movement speed out because these last few patches have been way too zoom for a lot of players. So those are the listed changes for 11.9, guys, which will be dropping in around 10 days time. And for the actual changes, if the Riot devs release the information at the time they usually do, I'll be back same time tomorrow to give you the rundown you desperately need. So make sure to hit the sub button and the bell so you don't miss it. And until then, this has been Coach.